So first of all, I want to say good afternoon and thank you for joining us for our October webinar entitled Unlocking Success, the new VSBA Negotiation Toolkit for Collective Bargaining. My name is Debbie Singizer and I am the VSBA Director of Board Services, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. And I'd like to introduce you now to all of our panelists. We have with us a real panel of experts, I might say. I'm going to introduce them in order of their appearance. First, we will have Joe McNeil, who is the General Counsel for the Burlington School District and an attorney with McNeil, Leddy, and Sheehan. And then we'll have Carrie Lamb, who is our Director of Operations here at the VSBA, whose idea it was actually to create this toolkit that you will see today. And as such, she not only had the idea, but she led the design and the creation, finalized the toolkit, and helped get it launched. So we owe everything to Carrie for all the hard work that she put into this toolkit. We'll have Mark Koenig, a member of the Addison Northwest School District Board, present and he's also a member of our Vermont School Boards Association board. Mark was part of the advisory group that worked with Carrie to design the toolkit. After Mark, we'll have Brenda. Brenda Fleming is our wonderful business manager at Rutland Northeast Supervisory Union. And then finally, Bill Kimball, who's superintendent of Maple Run Unified Union School District. Bill was also part of the advisory group and the design team that worked with Carrie on the toolkit. So thank you very much to all of our panelists for joining us today. We know how valuable your time is. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our first panelist, Joe McNeil. So please help me to welcome Joe. He will be giving us a very brief overview and timeline for the collective bargaining process. So Joe, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Debbie, and don't hesitate with any questions as I go through. This is going to be a very interesting bargaining cycle because of the uncertainties in the legislature, uncertainties with regard to funding, and the difference between appetite and ability with respect to the union demand and the board's response. What we're beginning negotiations across the spectrum in Chittenden County, at least. Every district except two are bargaining. Bargaining is just starting in bargaining, which has progressed. The demand by Vermont NEA has been through the locals in the 12% range, and that's new money, and the argument in favor of that has been that the associations need to make up for the ravages of inflation over their past contracts, which left them short. It's a very interesting and I think somewhat specious argument that essentially says we didn't make a good deal last time and we need to make it up this time. I think the rejoinder generally on the part of boards has to be, I'm sorry, but this is a prospective process. We would not expect that you would be tolerant of us if we said we made a bad deal in previous rounds of bargaining and need to make up for it in this round. Instead, we should be looking at the two major factors that typically go into bargaining, and that is number one, comparability, and number two, ability to pay. And with regard to comparability, everyone is aware or should be aware that the CPI is now dipped below 3%. And so settlements in the 12% range as proposed are, I would put in the category of preposterous. Um, what we've seen is that the Vermont NEA has started in that area and then as a quote unquote major concession comes down into the area of 6% and says that the boards need to come up to that. I think that loses sight of the fact that every little adjustment that the union makes downward from its original proposal costs them absolutely nothing, since it would all be new money to them. But every smidge that boards go up, in fact, costs them real money. So that is the backdrop. We're thinking, in the range of 3 to 5%, depending upon how many years you're going out, is appropriate in this round. Also, very quickly, I want to emphasize that we've seen playing out and expect to see it further, the notion of how the union responds to the fact that if we, that is the boards, agree at a level that you're proposing, there will have to be significant program cuts or reductions in force of actual people, including professional employees. And the response has typically been, we wish our departing brothers and sisters well, but for those who are staying, we need the amount that we're proposing. The other areas that I would just indicate, I expect in every round to be near the forefront are proposals for what I call co-management, and that is that the union will want participatory rights with regard to any sort of significant decision influencing the future structure and operations of the school district. And our suggestion would be that should be resisted. That the boards are elected for that purpose. They have a fiduciary responsibility to that purpose, and that should not be given up. The last point I'd want to make in this too short introduction is that we're seeing a good bit of effort being made to demand staffing levels in special education and demand assistance in the area of special education focus that has not been at the forefront previously. But given the, if you will, the concerns about underfunding of special education dollars against IEP demands, that we expect to be a major focus in this round of negotiations. So, in summary, more moderate than what will be proposed financially. Definitely be concerned about program retention and be prepared to stick to your guns when the indication is that layoffs are preferable to the levels of increase being sought. Be careful about what I call co-management proposals that will reduce substantially your ability to exercise your financial and fiduciary responsibilities, and be particularly attentive in the areas of special ed. And with that, I'll defer to the others, but stay available for any generalized or specific questions that may arise.
Great. Thank you, Joe, so much for that overview of what's happening in Chittenden County. That was really helpful to get us started. Again, just as a reminder for those who might have joined us late, we do ask if you have questions for our panelists to put them in the Q&A box. That's what I will be monitoring. Before we take questions from Joe, I do want to give the rest of the panelists a chance to present. So we're going to move right along. And our next speaker will be Carrie Lamb, who is going to give us an introduction to this new toolkit on the VSBA website, and give us a real high-level overview of what it is before we dig a little bit deeper into each of its component parts. So Carrie, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Debbie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to share so that you all can see. Oh, that's how the conference coming up. This is our website. I'm going to show you really quickly how to get to the toolkit. We're going to go ahead and go to the top here where it says toolkits on the menu, and we're going to go down to negotiation toolkit. I'm going to go over a real quick overview of what the toolkit includes, and then we'll go from there. The new negotiation toolkit has been available for about a month. We're going to walk through the site in detail today. I'd like to begin with a general overview of the page, and then we can have guests from the panel of our experts help us that created this toolkit. All right, let's take a general look at the page. This is the top, which is the table of contents. It lists what's in the page. At the top, we have the practical bargaining tips. Mark Koenig will go over this section in more detail. This section focuses on general tips to help with your process with negotiations. The number 2 is terminology. Mark will also take that one. Mark will be able to discuss this section with you. We have a link to many words that come up in negotiations. If you happen to come across words as you negotiate that you feel like would be great to be added to this, please don't hesitate to contact us here at VSBA to add those. We're always looking to make this toolkit and any other products that we have better. Number 3 is contracts. Brenda Fleming will discuss this section. This shared spreadsheet includes links to all teacher, paraeducator, maintenance, office staff, and general administrator contracts statewide. Number 4 is what's new. At this point, because this website is so new, we don't have any data for that yet. It is, I can show you though, this is what it will look like. This is sample data. It basically shows you what changed in a contract from the last one to this one. From here forward, as we get new contracts, I'll send a form to the business administrator and ask them to fill this out so that we can show you all quick and dirty what's changed in a contract since last year, so that you can see how things are, what things are looking like right now. Number 5 is comparison data. I'm going to go back up to table of contents. Number 5 is comparison data. And Brenda will also go over that with you to discuss the simple spreadsheet, how this simple spreadsheet can work for you in comparing data from different districts side by side. Number 6 is other important data, which Bill Kimball will look at some of these links with you and help explain how they can be helpful as a quick reference for you during negotiations. Number 7 is sample language. Bill will also discuss this area with you to help you keep your negotiations more flexible. And I will finish up with the remainder of the areas down here with arbitrators, mediators, fact finders, strike survival guide, and the negotiations webinar. I'd like to hand this off to Mark to start off with the website. Mark, would you like me to keep the page up as you talk about it, or would? Oh, is Mark not here now? Let's
He's
come back
muted.
to.
I think
Oh.
Mark is muted.
Oh, okay. There he is. Ask him to unmute. How about
There we
now,
go.
Mark? All right, there you go.
I
Okay,
do not
it's
like
all
this new
yours.
function.
I know.
So practical bargaining tips, kind of a negotiating 101 things to, if you haven't negotiated before, this is extremely important. And if you have, it's always nice to have a refresher or learn some new tricks. There's a long list with some quick statements of what it means. I think all of them are important. Some are more necessary than others. And the one I would actually think is the most important for a board is the one that says know your association. Your negotiating team needs to have worked with your board in full, probably during the budgeting season, work with your superintendent, work with your business manager. What do you need? What are your most important aspects that you want out of this contract? What are you willing to trade? What are non-starters? How far are you willing to go? You need to set your own boundaries before you ever walk into the room. If you think that the most you can possibly afford that you might get past in a budget is a 4.5% increase, then that's your ceiling. And you can't, unless somehow you can trade other funds away that will offset it, no matter where if you're negotiating 6% raise and you can afford a 4.5% raise, you're in trouble. So you really have to understand before you ever start putting together your proposal what you need and what you can afford. And then you need to be honest when you hit that ceiling with your negotiations with the union. You have to say, this is it. This is why. Lay out the exact numbers. Make sure your numbers are correct. Make sure when you're saying that there are 400 students in your building, there better be 400, not 350 or 500. Because if they come back and say that you're wrong, they're not going to trust anything else you say. Don't take it personally is a big one. It's going to feel personal. They're going to turn anything that you say you're not going to give them money is that you don't like teachers, you don't respect their job, you don't respect education. The tricky part is that the union has one interested party, and that's the union and its members, and they are doing what they can to get the best deal for their people, period. Doesn't matter about students, it doesn't matter about taxpayers. That's it. Whereas the board has to figure out the district and the taxpayers and the parents and the students and the employees and follow federal law and state law and local ordinances. So boards have a myriad of interested parties that are all pulling them in different directions while you're trying to negotiate this contract. You have to keep that in mind and just try and make the best deal for as many of those parties as possible in a way that once this is in place, your budgets are going to be able to be passed by your voters. A couple of the other things that really caught my eye, and I have unfortunately fallen into things like avoid imprecise language. The two words that come to mind most for me is days and years. Are you talking about a school day? Are you talking about a business day? Are you talking about a calendar day? So, you have to know what you specify while you're talking about a day within your language. Same with years. Is it the academic year? Is it a calendar year? Is it a fiscal year? Because all of those can have an impact on what that interpretation will be of whatever clause you're using it in. So try not to leave anything that can be guessed, because if it ever goes before an arbitrator or a judge, it will almost always be decided as to whatever's most beneficial to the employee. So you don't want that to happen. And finalizing language in a hurry. both don't rush it, but also it was our common practice in my district to have tentative agreements as we went along. So as we decided bits and pieces of a contract, we would sign off on it. Both sides would agree that section 1 is now completed. We've taken that off the table. We've agreed to it. The trouble is that if you get 3 or 4 months into your negotiation and now you're working on section 8, something in section 1 might be relevant to section 8, but you've already signed off on it. So you can tentatively agree without signing anything. It's like, okay, we think we've put this to bed, but it's still on the table if it comes up later on and we need to change things around. So the only time you should sign is when you have a final contract that everybody's agreed to and you're ready to sign the master agreement. It's not in pieces. So those are, I think, my big takeaways for bargaining. And if people have specific questions that, we can talk about that at the end. And the terminology is really just a dictionary that Carrie's been putting together, a lot of keywords and concepts that may or may not come up. As a board member, it's nice just to review this in general. It's got all of the important Vermont acts that have happened over the past few years. So if you don't remember what an act is, this is a good cheat sheet to go to. If you're unfamiliar with some of the various acronyms that fly all over the way in school districts about different things, it's a helpful tool just as a board member who's trying to keep all of those pieces straight in your heads. But it might come up during negotiations, and this is a quick way to remember what the impact might be on what's being said to you. So with that, I will shut down and move on to the next. I think Brenda is next. And Carrie, she might be muted on your end.
Thanks for the reminder. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted. Carrie, can you show my slides?
I'd be happy to show your slides. Carrie, if you can stop sharing, I'll share my screen.
Thank you, Deb.
Perfect. You're welcome.
Okay, if you can just go to the next slide. So this is the contracts, and I will tell you that it's a pretty amazing and wonderful collection of all of the different contracts by school district and supervisory union, but also by bargaining unit. And I will also tell you that as you move to the contracts beyond teachers, you will find more and more dissimilarities. But the teacher contract, the first column C, does have majority are very similar from contract to contract. The next slide. So it's all about comparability as well as ability to pay. So I just wanted to show some snapshots of how to dive into this information. The first thing you do is define who you're comparable. We are one of those that are negotiating this year. So I picked who we're comparable and figured I'd do 2 birds with 1 stone. Happen to be Slate Valley. They are a neighbor, but they are also like a mirror image of us in regards to the number of schools, the size, the location, and even the poverty levels. So when you click on the contract, you're going to see a lot of data from multiple years, and you can click into each one of those to see any trends if you need to. But the function I use the most after going into a contract is the search function and pull up the salary schedules. Next slide. And as you move through the arrows to where it said salary schedules, you'll get to some verbiage. Of course, this is the meat of what we're looking at. How much was the base salary last year? What's the increase and what will the new base be? And how many years are outlined right here. And then you can see down under number 3 that it will also tell you a little bit about the index and how the index works. And in their example, the index drops 3% per step and 3.5% moving over per column. The next slide. And then you'll also find things that might surprise you that are important when you're looking at it from a comparability. And in this one, you'll notice that they now have a new higher salary schedule. So as you're doing that search, and the reason why I would recommend you do it instead of just going straight to the salary schedule is there might be surprises that you need to consider while you're looking at comparability. The next slide. So here's the salary schedule, and generally the things that we want to know are over on the right. What is the beginning of the contract? In this case, the lowest number. Sometimes some people call that the top, some people call that the bottom. Low and high seems to work because to me, that's the top of the page and the other one's at the bottom of the page. But so the lowest salary is 48,000, the highest is 87. And you can see the index underneath each of the salaries tells you that the difference between the lowest and the highest is 180% or almost 181. So that means you can always take that 48,170, the low, times it by the high index to get you to what the bottom contract is or the highest pay is. It's also important to notice how many columns there are and how many movements people have. So in this case, there are 8 columns as teachers can move over and over, and there are 20 steps. Next. And this was the surprise, right? So now they have a new higher replacements placement schedule. And as you can see, if you look at the bottom, steps no longer equal years of experience. And so it's important to know that when you're looking at it from a comparability, that there might be some difference there. The next schedule. And then I did want to tap into the comparison data. This is just the link that Carrie already showed you. The next one. So here's a lot of great base information to capture in one place so you can start looking at it. The districts that are either comparable to you throughout the state, the districts that are neighbors to you, or if you happen to have someone who's a neighbor and comparable, they should probably be your first comparison. And so in our district, Slate Valley is our first comparison because they are both a neighbor and very comparable to our governance structure and setup. And then you may need to use that to add things. So as Mark was saying, you know, in addition to comparability, is what do you want? What does your school district need to gain from bargaining? And you can add that there. And so you get into things like the length of day, the number of days in the contract, prep time, professional development, sick leave, sick banks, all of those things. And you can use that F9 or that magnifying search button on your contracts to search those terms and find that information. You don't need to fill this whole page out. There's a lot of things that you might not care about, might not be part of your goals for this negotiation session. So don't do more work than you have to do. This is hard enough as it is. Back to definitions, I think it's important to understand the difference between new money and a percent increase on the matrix. So I just kind of walk you through what new money is. The NEA tends to always negotiate new money, which is cheaper or less expensive in the long run and requires a 2-step calculation versus just increasing the base and every step according to the index. So the first thing about new money is it includes step movements or years of service or drops. It generally does not also include column movements. So you would calculate what the current cost of teacher salaries are. You would say what the new money is. In this example, I'm saying 8 million. That means a 3% of new money, 240,000. And then you would calculate how much it's going to cost to move everyone down one step. In this hypothetical example, it's 168,000. And then the remaining amount of 72,000 is added to the base and proportionately to each step. In the next slide. And so it makes a big difference. So in this example, again, I'm using the the hypothetical example of a low of 46,281 plus the base increase makes it 48,170. And then because this school district does have an index on theirs, you know that the bottom or the lowest to the highest is 180%. You multiply that out and you get 87,000. If you were just doing it based on moving every step in salary by 3%, then that 48,170 would become 49,937. And then the high 87,091 in new money would become 90,286. So it's good to understand the terminology as you're negotiating and what your goals are. That's all I have. I think it's Bill.
Yes, I think we're on to Bill. Bill, let me unmute you. And
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that. The first part that I'm going to talk about two sections here, the other important data, which really sets up your negotiations when you're going to talk about what the percentage increase that Brenda just went over and where you're at as a board. And it really sets up the backup for the board. I have found, and this is number 6 on the negotiation tool. Thanks, Carrie. I should have had you go there. And Carrie, I want to forewarn you, I'm going to need to, I want to share something I didn't tell you, but I think it would be good just to show for section 7 that I have in my own, and I'll be glad to share it back to VSBA to share out to folks.
Okay.
In this other important data, we really like to set the economic context of the district and of the state. I also look by regions, and I look at one of the things I do when I'm doing my work here for Maple Run, and I did it in my previous superintendency, is look at the Vermont NEA region, because there's one Uniserv director and there's a lot of conversation that's going back and forth at their bargaining council. So it's kind of good to know what other districts are doing, how they're doing financially, which is a lot of what all this section number 6 does, gives you a lot of information about the labor market, Bureau of Labor Statistics, probably the one I stayed the closest to. And Joel talked about this earlier, which was the Consumer Price Index. Make sure you're right on top of changes and historical. There's actually some really good calculators in there that you can use to either prove or disprove when the union claims they need to make up for inflationary times. There's an easy way to calculate all that in there. And that's something that's been really helpful. One of the other things that I do with our association here, and we're really lucky to partner with them, and this is all the relationship building that happens before negotiation that Mark was talking about, is we have been able so far, and I hope it happens this year for us as well, is we don't fight over the data that comes from these sources. So, and we all agree that if it comes from this, if it's coming from the Consumer Price Index, we all say it's 3.2. We just don't want to get into that part. It gets back to that part Mark was talking about. Let's not argue over the data, but don't make a mistake in the data at the same time. So we try to set all those in our ground rules part. So a lot of the stuff we'll hand over right at the beginning of negotiations. And can we all agree this is what it is? We may have different viewpoints of what we want from where we're bargaining, but let's not fight over where the data is coming from and what the data gives us for figures. So that to me is really important. And important to share, frankly, with the association. I try to put it right on the table at the beginning. The sample language, there's some really good templates in here that are made of how to track sample language at each of your issues that the association will bring and that you will bring as a negotiation team. And Carrie, can you just go on that preparation time? Can you just click on that? So I do something very similar where I had a document that shows, and I do it all within my, as I said, Vermont NEA region, bargaining region. So I'll pull all the contracts and paste them into something like this for my negotiation team so they can see it. At the same time, we start to look at what language do we want. So we actually have a template that goes above each of these sample languages from other districts. What are we trying to target and what's the current contract say? And then we try to do that. We know what we want to go in as a negotiation team, and then the association, they'll come to us. So then, Carrie, if I could show a Word document, like I said, I'm sorry I didn't give you this earlier, and I'll send you a copy of it. So if I can share my screen,
Oh,
yeah, you'll have to get out, and then if you can allow me to do that.
I think I did send you.
Okay, let
Permission.
me see if I can do that. Perfect. And share. You should see a Word document right now. Does everyone see that Word document?
Yes.
What we do is we list all the issues that we have, and you'll see we number them all, and we talk about what are technical level changes and language changes, what are cost issues, and what are other issues. Because we want to know if we have to track something, what's the financial implication if we go and make this change. And at the same time, I have the board do a priority on each of these. So then that backup document that you saw Carrie on earlier that showed the sample language, at the top, we say, is it a technical, a cost issue, or some other issue? And then we put our priority. And it really helps when we're getting into the horse trading back and forth, like, that one on the sick bank, that's okay. We were allowed to let that one go. But the one on automatic need to change wording for no automatic step, that's one we want to hold back on. And so we use this as an organizational tool, and we create it in our ground rules, after the first 2 meetings, all articles that are up for negotiation have to be on the table. So we put this together, and we actually agreed with our association. We usually meet every other week, but after the second meeting we take a 3 to 4 week break so we can do our research on the areas that have been brought to the table. And it's a real strategy document. And Carrie, if I don't get this to you, send me an email you can PDF this and use it. This is one from 2019, so I don't think there's anything here that's outside I'll clean it up a little for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll stop sharing. Just got to find my control bar. Where did that go? Oh, it's right here. No. Sorry, Carrie. I don't know if you can stop me from sharing because I don't know where the bar went. Oh, here it is. Yep, I got it.
Okay, great. Got it?
I'm trying to stop it. It doesn't seem to. There it goes. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Okay. Then I'm going to finish up here with going back to the website. All right. So we are almost to the bottom. We're getting close. We're on number 8, arbitrators, mediators, and fact finders. The next 2 areas we're going to discuss are the areas that we hope you do not need to use in the future. But if you do, the VSBA is here to support you. VSBA has been diligently collecting valuable insights from superintendents and business managers for over 20 years, focusing on key considerations for school boards when selecting arbitrators, mediators, and fact finders. I'll show you what it looks like. We provide comprehensive information, including contact details, the context of their hiring, the issues addressed, performance evaluations, and the outcomes of the decisions. To further assist school boards, we have developed a concise 14-page, that's the next part. So that's what's available here. And now we're going to go on to the strike survival guide. You can access, by the way, I should let you know this, you can also access the arbitrary mediator or fact finders by clicking here or by clicking the document. In the same way down here, the strike guide, you can go to the PDF file download or go to read more. So to further assist school boards, we've developed a concise 14-page strike survival guide. While no one wishes to find themselves in a situation, it's crucial to be prepared. The guide begins by outlining the legal framework surrounding the right to strike, injunctions, and picketing. It then explores the responsibility of school boards, superintendents, and principals. Key topics covered include the decision to keep schools opened or closed during strikes, impacts on substitutes and non-striking employees, strategies for managing media relations and public perception, how to effectively respond to union tactics, and considerations for post-strike scenarios. Well, we hope you never have to utilize this guide. It's an essential resource should that arise. And finally, number 10 is the negotiations webinars. At the bottom of the page, we'll find all webinars that are relevant to this topic. The webinar will be, this webinar will be posted in the section once we have edited and prepared it to go up. And that's all we have, Debbie. It's I would also like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all of the wonderful people that worked with us to put this information together. We wanted it to be information that was useful to school board members and business managers and superintendents as they negotiate. And so the best people to talk to about it were those people. And I thank them for all their time that they put into helping this website come together. Debbie, I'll give it back to you.
I echo what Carrie said. My gratitude to all of you who had a hand in that toolkit. Just looking at it, this was the first opportunity I had to really look at it with all of you, and I am super impressed. And this is a goldmine of information and resources that I think many, many districts are going to find very useful. So thank you for doing all of that hard work. We have a few questions that came in while presentations were being given. And the first one is directed to Joe. Joe, this viewer is wondering, she said it would be helpful if you could clarify if you are seeing demands for 12% in the first year of the contract, or is that 12% over the life of the contract? And if it is the first year, what are you seeing in terms of total increase over the life of the contract?
Oh, Joe, we can't hear you. This new Zoom, I have to give you permission. Okay, now you can unmute.
Now can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what we're seeing, and understand that we're just in the formative stages of most of the contracts that at least are in Chittenden County, but we're seeing 12% in the first year, and we're seeing something close to 6% new money, STEP included, in the out years. Again, the argument seems to be that there needs to be some makeup. I would encourage school board members not to fall for that. Number one, just on principle that you want to be forward-looking in your negotiations and look to both comparability and ability to pay currently. Number two, be careful of cherry picking in terms of what needs to be made up. Often, if a statement is made that, over the last 3 years, we're short by 4%, ask them to look over the last 5 years, because typically credit is not given where the level of increase is more than the CPI in any given year. And historically, boards have well exceeded CPI. If you took like a 20-year average, for example, I doubt that there'll be a school district in Vermont that is underneath the CPI across that trend line. But that's the answer to the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have a question for any of you who wishes to answer it. Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union has negotiated a deal with a $1,600 increase plus a small percentage. Is this a useful or advantageous use of funds? Any thoughts about that? So they negotiated a deal with a $1,600 increase plus a small percentage. Is this a useful or advantageous use of funds? Go ahead, Mark. If you can unmute, Carrie.
There we go. I mean, it's just money. So if that is a way for you to work with your union, you just have to know at the end of the day what the bottom line is on your budget. It'd also be interesting, is that $1,600 going into the cell, or is that being counted as a one-time bonus and the numbers in your table aren't changing? You're just giving $1,600 bonus for the year that's not going to roll over year to year.
I would just add to Mark's comment, I think that's exactly right. And more and more, we're seeing that a portion of the settlement is one-time money. And the value of doing that is that it doesn't roll into the base, and it's not a gift that keeps on giving from year to year. But it provides some of the funds necessary in whatever year you're talking about. It's hard to know from the question exactly how that money is characterized, but I think ultimately Mark's right. It's all money, and you just want to make sure that you're aware of your total cost of the contract.
Great. Bill.
When Mark said, it's all money, he's absolutely right. So one of the things I don't always get agreement from the other side of the table, but you saw I had issues that were cost issues. So I work in partnership with my business manager to price out what those other issues are going to cost us and say, so if you initiated at 12%, well, I can already break you down to 9 because these other issues that you want, they cost us this. Like I said, sometimes it's recognized, sometimes it's not, but that is my way of saying Mark's 100% right of like know your cost for everything, because you can say to them, do you really want that change in that article? This is what it's going to cost the organization. Or would you rather have that somewhere else?
As Bill and Mark have both said, and sort of summarized by the old bargaining principle, it's not the principle, it's the money. And if you just bear that in mind, you're well on your way to understanding the best approach to bargaining.
Well, and along with it's all money, 2018, we changed the healthcare negotiations. And so that's off individual local tables now, but it's still a cost driver. And so when you're at negotiations and they say, well, we're not, we're getting money, you're like, well, we just paid 17% increase on your premiums that we cover 80% of. And that cost our district X amount of money. They're going to come back saying that's not in my paycheck. It's not going into my bank account. It doesn't matter. It's still compensation towards the teacher or towards the staff member. And you can't, even though you don't have the power to negotiate that, you are still paying it. It is still part of the contract. So don't forget that money that's going out the door.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Good point. Good thing to keep in mind. I think this question maybe could be answered best by Brenda, because you were the one who showed us the new hire step table. Do you know if this new hire step table is merit-based?
I don't know. It isn't my district, but
Okay.
I think everyone would agree with me that it is highly unlikely for anything to be merit-based in a contract. So the odds of that being merit-based is really slim.
If I could just add a point that sort of gets to this, and it was mentioned earlier that most contracts actually say that step movement is not automatic, but there are standards that apply when you need to, when it's not to be awarded. For example, some say without it can't be denied arbitrarily or capriciously. Others say it can't be denied without appropriate cause. But I would like to see at some point a school district that actually says to a individual, you know what, you're not getting a step increase, and here's why. That is a tool in the toolbox that rarely happens, but I believe should happen more, just to emphasize the fact that there is management and evaluations should and do count. But more in the non-application than in the application.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. We have a couple questions that came in based on the information that you shared, Joe. It seems like it's fair to say that the NEA is not reading the room. Is that accurate?
They're not reading the rooms I'm in. And I think that Mark said it well at the beginning of his presentation. We need to understand that they have a fiduciary responsibility to one constituency, and that is summed up when George, what's his name, Meany was the head of the AFL-CIO. He has a famous quote. He was asked, "What are the unions after?" And his answer was more. And I think that, you know, if you understand it's not dishonorable on their part, that's what they're organized for, to get more. You as superintendents, board members, whatever, you have a broader constituency and a different fiduciary responsibility, running, you know, ultimately to the taxpayers and residents. So it's not unusual to have different approaches based upon who you're reporting to.
Joe, the question is back to you again. They're wondering, is it okay to share this information that you've given us, the details of your presentation? Is it okay to share that in emails with this person's fellow board members?
I don't have any problem with that. It's the reality that we're seeing.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And our final question, can you remind us, or can you remind me what the privacy confidentiality concerns are during the negotiation process? That's a good question.
Mark mentioned about, and Bill did as well, about ground rules. This is an interesting topic that we could discuss at length, but the usual is that board negotiating teams can report to their superintendency and the managers, and they can also report to the board. The NEA usually wants in ground rules the right to report to their membership, and as well as to Vermont NEA officials. That creates quite an imbalance because when they report to their membership, they're in effect reporting their view to their world. And you know, if you have 400 teachers, let's say, and they have partners who are going to be told, here's what's happening, but keep it to yourself. It's not very long before their view becomes public, and the view of the board is much more limited. So we suggest in any ground rule setup that the boards reserve the right to counter any misinformation that is put out publicly, even though there is a general prohibition on publication until impasse is reached.
Right. Thank you. Well, with that, we are just a few minutes past the hour, which is pretty good. We made up some time there, given our technical glitches at the beginning. But before we close, I want to thank, first of all, our viewers for viewing this webinar, and also especially to this dream team that we have on the screen. Thank you all very much for sharing your expertise with us. Thank you again to Carrie and all your huge efforts with this negotiation toolkit. And I know you had help, Carrie, and you'd be the first one to remind us that you didn't do it alone. So I do want to recognize those that did help Carrie with this toolkit. I also just wanted to ask you again to please take the evaluation at the end of this webinar. We really do appreciate every feedback that you give us. And one final reminder is the VSA VSBA annual conference is coming up at the end of this month, and our registration is closing this Thursday. So if you plan to attend, and I hope you all will, and haven't yet registered, please go to our website and you can find all the information about the conference as well as the registration form there. So I wish you all a wonderful afternoon, and thank you again to our panelists, and we'll hope to see you all very soon.